How do you expect somebody like this is the hard part. Like, nobody ever talks about this. But if you come from a background, especially if you convert into Islam, right? And you come from a background of like having girlfriends or having boyfriends or whatever, and then now, as soon as you go out on a date with somebody, you're just talking about marriage from the door. You know what I mean? Like a lot.
But I don't think that that's a misnomer. I don't think that the first conversation that you're having with someone,
I don't mean the first conversation. I mean, because like we don't do that. Like we don't do the boyfriend girlfriend thing, whatever. So
we have courting. We court.
Yeah.
There are rules to the courting, but there is a courting process.
Okay, what is that process?
Well, it all depends. If you're marrying into somebody's family, and this is, I think that, for those of us who converted to Islam, I think that we don't really see the whole courting process from an Islamic context. If you are, you got to keep in mind, during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when men were marrying women, they were marrying into families. A lot of times the parents converted to Islam, and, so if you wanted to marry a woman, you went to the father, and the father decided, how much, to what extent you were going to be close enough to his daughter before they decided that you guys were going to get married. And in the Prophet's community, there was familiarity. So pretty much everybody knew everybody. Everybody was familiar with everybody. They grew up together. They grew up in the same environments and the same, So when a father came to a young guy and said, I want to marry you to my daughter, he already knows the daughter. There's a familiarity there, and the father will decide how that was going to take place. In our day and time, many of us are converts to Islam. So if you see a woman that you are interested in, all right, and she has a father, and she comes from an Islamic household, parents are Muslim, grandparents are Muslim, they're going to decide how that courting process is going to work, based upon to what extent or to what capacity they, I remember the first time that, upon my release from prison, and there was a young sister that I was interested in at that time. And the father brought me over to his house. He had his daughter cook, to give me an opportunity to taste her food. We sat down in the dining room and we talked. And then he allowed me and her to go into the living room by ourselves and talk. That was the way that they decided to do that, because that was her father. And he's the wali. So he decides to what extent I'm going to have access to his daughter. All right. And of course, that should be within the guidelines of Islam.
And that's exactly why we have wali. Right?
Now, let's just say you want to marry someone who is a convert to Islam. Now, she doesn't have any Muslim relatives. She doesn't have a Muslim father, Muslim uncle. Nobody else in her family is Muslim. Okay, so what does the courting process look like for that? That's going to look a lot different. You know what I mean? It should look a lot different anyway. All right. So the proper way that should be done is that she belongs to an Islamic community. I'm talking about ideally, the ideal situation. She belongs to an Islamic community. The imam, is very active in the community. The imam is responsible for, if a brother comes to him and says that he's interested in that woman, then the imam would arrange a meeting in his office or in a particular location that the woman is comfortable with. The imam is there, the brother is there, the sister is there. They're communicating with each other, not necessarily about marriage at that moment, although marriage is the long goal. That is the end goal for them. But they're going to meet. The imam, sometimes, I know in the past, the imams may have been busy, so they might appoint somebody to, facilitate that marriage process for them. You can use my office. The brother that the imam, appoints is now known as the wakil, and he's there to facilitate the conversation between them. So as long as they're, just to make sure that they're not alone. And then they're meeting with one another. In some instances, I know where, the imam has gone out with the brother and the potential, sister that they want to get married. They've gone to a restaurant, in a kind of more informal space, and that all depends on the imam's schedule and whoever the imam appoints. That doesn't really happen in today's time. It doesn't happen for a number of reasons. The African-American Muslim community in many instances has become very toxic. You know what I mean? So now a sister goes to the imam, if she's even a part of a community, and says, you know, I'm interested in this brother, or the brother says, I'm interested in this sister. In many instances, you'll have the imam who himself is interested in the sister. You got that scenario. So the imam will tell the brother, oh, the sister's not interested in you. Meanwhile, she probably is, but he's throwing a monkey wrench in the game because he's interested in the sister. It's just really toxic. You know what I mean? How are you interested in a sister that you're supposed to be representing? That becomes problematic. And how does it get to that point? Because the imam doesn't have any boundaries. There are no ethical protocols put in place that an imam of a masjid that is representing a woman should not be allowed to marry that woman, period. It's unethical. Because if you marry her in the community, that's just like you getting into a relationship with your coworker. You know what I mean? It's in close proximity, and it has the ability to ruin his reputation. You know what I mean? If anything goes sour in that situation and she says, oh, well, you know, we did this before we got married, like your credibility is shot. And it has happened in many instances. Imam should not be able to marry a woman that he was once responsible for. He was a wali for. That should be off limits, period.
What if he can't find no brother for it? High and low, can't find nobody for it.
So he's just going to marry her simply because he can't find a brother for her? What is she, like a basket case? Like she a charity case? Like we just passing the women around like we pimps? Like, well, I can't find nobody for you, so by default, I'm going to marry you? No. Hell no.
Hey, I'm not saying this should happen. I'm just saying that's what does happen.
In that case, she has to exercise patience.
Yeah.
Until she either finds someone or someone comes along. I mean, she has to, and while we say, oh, you know, it's easy for you to say people should be patient. I mean, you think about Aisha, radiallahu ta'ala anha, she was 18 years old when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam died. She didn't die until she was in her 50s. That means that she had to exercise patience because she was not allowed to remarry. And I mean, it is possible that we are living in times where women just have to be patient.
Yeah.
So the reality, the cold reality of the fact that you may never find a husband and you may actually have to die single, it's a reality. Other than that, you can go and, you know, enjoy yourself, but then you got to deal with the consequences of that. And I mean, if you're okay with jeopardizing your hereafter over, you know, 5 minutes of pleasure, 10 minutes of pleasure, then by all means. For myself, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. It's not worth it. Once you get up off of the person, the feeling, the guilt, the shame, and everything that is associated with that, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. For some people it is. Well, I have needs. Well, we all got needs, but we also have fasting. We also have other things that help us in our religion to restrain those desires. And if you're not willing to go through that and you're willing to take the easy route out and just say, well, I got needs, you know, Allah knows my situation and all of the other devilish, you know, excuses that we come up with. I mean, to each his own. If that's the way you want to go out, you know what I mean? I say all the time, some people were okay on their way to Jannah before, you know, they got into the whole marriage process. And then we allow situations to jeopardize us going to paradise. I'm sorry. I don't know how many years I got left on this earth. You know what I'm saying? Allah is just calling us back one by one. I'm not going to jeopardize my paradise for, it's not worth it. It's not worth it.